So this evening, I want to go through I think I did it last week too, the Ajahn Lee meditation of the 5 points. Um, and sometimes I do the throat, but the actual Ajahn Lee, the way that he taught it was the tip of the nose, the third eye, the top of the head, the middle of the brain, and the heart. So we'll start, or the meditation that we'll do tonight, we'll start with that. Um, there's, uh, do you remember? I guess it's still around, but in the '60s and the '70s, there was TM, Transcendental Meditation, and probably a few of you have have done it. Um, I know when I was in high school, somebody came by and was uh, trying to get people to sign up for it. It was interesting, but it was also like $100. And when you're 16 years old, it's it's sort of there was something about it that I didn't feel quite right about. Anyway, but with most of us, it may have been the first time we heard the word transcendental. Or one of the earlier times that we heard the word transcendental, and I'm sure you wondered what that meant. And we don't use that word very often these days. Um, but it's kind of an interesting word. And the other part, I hope I can tie these together, is we get caught in viewpoints, ideas about ourselves and about the world. And we get caught in looking at things in certain ways. We get caught in naming things in certain ways. And it was pointed out to me this week by somebody that in their practice they had an insight where there was this sense that if they reframed what their experience was, if they put another name on it, saw it in a different context, then it opened up into a new experience. So we're talking about the transcendental, we're talking about the energy body, and we're talking about viewpoints or perceptions that get kind of frozen. We get kind of stuck with them. And in these practices, we are moving towards the transcendental. And in a way, you could say that the transcendental is moving outside of the framework in which we usually view our lives, which we usually view ourselves. And I don't know if anybody in this group knows any old people, but have you noticed with old people how they can just seem to get their world gets smaller and smaller, more narrow. You especially see it in people in their 80s and 90s. It doesn't have to be the case, but you see that. And then towards the or they're getting towards very old age, at times it's like their mind doesn't have any capacity to see anything outside of this kind of very narrow type of conditioning. It's like they're looking at the world through a straw, like you're looking at the sky through a straw. So, transcendental meditation, if you will, is learning to step outside the habitual thought form patterns, the traditional ways of knowing. But you have to understand that we do that in every moment of the day. Every moment of the day. So the transcendental meditation is bringing awareness to every moment of the day. And when we have a moment of knowing, of awareness, of pure knowing, we are not caught up in the conditioned. We're seeing the same thing, but there's an openness, there's a spaciousness. We're seeing the clock on the wall, but there's a completely different story around it. So the process of transcendental meditation, if you will, and I'm using this term not how it was used by the Maharishi Yogi, or perhaps John Lennon or George Harrison, but the transcendental meditation is that process of bringing awareness to each moment of the day and not seeing things in the old framework. Opening up that path of a clearer seeing. So in the places that we get stuck, look at your thinking around it. Look at how you're defining it. Look at the words that you're using to express or to claim your stuckness. I'm an anxious person. I'm a depressed person. Woof. It's like a weight that we carry. So in that moment of awareness is that moment of transcending, of seeing beyond those thought patterns that brought us to the experience, to the way of seeing, to our way of seeing to the way of looking at what's taking place, to our way of defining ourselves. A very simple way is looking at an obstacle in your day. Something that's getting in your way. Something that's tripping you up. Is there another way of seeing that object? Is there another way of seeing that situation? but you're not seeing it as an obstacle. A lot of times if we look back, we can look at the obstacles that got in our way. And from the context of a wider view, from the context of time, we could see that that obstacle was actually what moved us forward. If you hadn't had that obstacle, you wouldn't have moved on from where you were. And, the truth is that growth is uncomfortable. It just is. So when the practice becomes uncomfortable, when the awareness becomes uncomfortable, when we become uncomfortable with ourselves, that's where the work is. But one of the things that can be really helpful is to reframe how we're seeing that situation. And whose voice is it when you're complaining about the obstacle? Is it really your voice? Or do you hear a little bit of your dad or your mom? Or somebody else? We are taught from a really, really young age to react, to look at things in certain ways. A lot of the times our reaction, we're on automatic. Well, geez, there you go. Wouldn't you know? Here it comes again. The one I like a lot is, like it a lot. It amuses me. We'll have like 3 or 4 really nice days in May. And you're like, man, hasn't this been a great week? Yeah, but we're going to pay for it later. And it's like everybody's heard that. Maybe everybody's said that. But we need to look at what we see as a problem. We need to look at what we see as a difficulty. We need to look at something that's messing our lives up. And maybe reframe it. It's hard to do. There's certain things that are really, really difficult to do. But in that moment of seeing that pattern, and in that moment of being in awareness, there's a great moment of transcendence there. So when we do these samatha practices, when we do these meditation practices working with the energy body, we are creating a quality of energy / mind / consciousness. We are creating a context that is helping us slide into the transcendental. That'd be a good t-shirt or hat, wouldn't it? Sliding into the transcendental. Have it off to the side a little bit, your cap, have it on backwards. What are you doing? I'm sliding into transcendental. So with these practices that we do with the breath, opening up, flow, concentrating the mind, we are creating this framework, this context in which we are opening up to the transcendental. We are opening up, and why are we opening up to the transcendental? Because we're stepping outside of conditioned response. We're opening up to that sense of the unknown. That sense of not knowing, not defining, questioning. Do you know that experience in your life where it feels like there's a big wall in your way and you don't know how you're going to get through it? And one day you realize that wall is gone. It's just not there. And I think if we think about our life, we all know those experiences. How am I going to get through this? I remember the first house I bought, no sooner had I moved in, and I could barely afford it. And I found out that my septic system was done. It didn't work. It was blocked up. And I went and I called a guy, and it was going to cost an amount of money I couldn't even consider. You know, it was like, what am I going to do? There's just this wall, right? But we all know those situations, don't we? There's a whole bunch of lines I could say about that, but there's children in the room, so I won't. And you know what? A friend came by, and it was like, so I started to dig the septic field up by hand. And it was, and if you know anything about tile beds, it's sand and gravel. It's really heavy going. And I spent about half a day on it, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do. And then a friend came by, and he said, "What are you doing?" This is what I'm doing. And he said, "I'll come by tomorrow." And he came by with a crew of guys, and we got that field dug up in a day. Right? But we all have those stories, I hope. Things you can't possibly, situations you can't possibly see yourself moving through. Walls that appear in front of you, and then they're gone. Sometimes it happens in a spontaneous way like that, but sometimes those obstacles are the result of deep formations within our conditioning that we really need to look at. And we really need to look at our views around it, our belief system, our conditioning. We need to reframe it. Because when we're reframing it as I am stuck, when we're reframing it from the situation of the small I, we're looking at it through a straw. We're looking at the sky through a straw. And sometimes it doesn't change the situation, but when we reframe it, our relationship to it completely changes. And then things have a way of resolving. Things have a way of moving forward. So the transcendental, the blessings, if you will, if we allow ourselves to be opened up to that, in these practices we do, these energy body practices, if we allow ourselves to open up to that, then the transcendental comes through. There's knowledge that comes through. There's insight that comes through. But we have to create the space. And it's hard because the conditioning runs so deep. And the stories we tell ourselves, we've told ourselves for so long. It's hard and it's not. Because in a moment, the straw drops and we see the sky. In a moment, the sky's always there. You know, you can't even get a straw in Europe now. This is a bad joke. Yeah. The whole continent is transcendental. Okay. So think of that term this week. Think of the term transcendental. It's an interesting term. Transcend your framework. Transcend your viewpoint. And there's kind of a magic that happens when we open up to it. It's kind of a magic that happens.